My wife Megan was with me at that time, and she is screaming hysterically that we're about to go off this mountain. In the equation of owning your dream car, what's honestly a lot more important than how you buy it is how you use it. And an issue that presents with a lot of really high value clients in most exotic car dealerships is that even though they might come in and buy a new Lamborghini or Ferrari every year, they don't buy as often as they could because, in most cases, they have the coolest cars of anyone they know. And so when I was selling cars at Lamborghini Atlanta, one of the things that I really kind of pioneered for the dealership was to make sure that I made our customers friends with each other. Because in that circumstance, they get a lot more competitive. They see that their friend has some new car and is very excited about it or is driving it in some way, and it makes them want to buy more cars somewhat competitively, but also just because they're all having fun with them together. And as you think about whether or not it's time to upgrade to the next car, a real barrier to that can be I'm not having as much fun with it. And so one thing that I really tried to facilitate was getting them all together for some really, really fun drives. And when you're looking at a place to live as a car enthusiast, obviously you've got to deal with storage and garages and real estate and things like that. But the roads around where you live are a huge limiting factor. And the great thing about living in Metro Atlanta is that we've got all these amazing roads to drive on in the North Georgia mountains. And everything just north of Dahlonega, you don't even have to go all the way up to Tail of the Dragon, are just some amazingly technical and well-maintained and generally fairly empty roads to go out and enjoy a great car. And so one thing that I tried to do very early on was get guys together on like a Sunday afternoon and just go on an awesome drive up into the mountains. And I composed a loop that was about 150 miles that went through a lot of the best roads and brought us all back. So it wasn't something that was going to take, a whole day. A half day where we'd kind of wind up and have dinner somewhere on the way home was perfect. And when I would take these guys on these runs, we did dozens of these mountain drives, they would not only see what their car would do, but they'd also see what all their friends were doing with their cars. And it really makes you feel like you've almost mastered what the car can do. It's kind of like taking it to the track or going out in the middle of the night and seeing how fast it'll go. It's just you feeling like how you use the car was as the factory intended. And when you looked back on ownership and you could say that you'd used it in all these ways and put all these significant and meaningful and whole lot of fun miles on the cars, it made more sense to buy the next one. The other thing that was fantastic and honestly a little bit unexpected was that it created this new demand for barely used exotic cars, because in general there needs to be a fairly big gap between what it takes to buy one new and how much you need to save to buy one used, because the novelty of picking out every option and making sure that it's the exact manifestation of what you love about that car and the color and the stitching and the interior and the options and the wheels and everything else kind of fades when you think, I'm going to put some miles on this thing and I want to make sure that I minimize whatever the depreciation could be. And so we got really good at selling express cars that accumulated a lot of miles quickly, or kind of any other barely used car that might have faced some more significant depreciation in another market where the owners weren't immediately taking their cars out and driving them a lot. There would be a pretty fertile opportunity not only to make a little bit of money on these cars off the normal spread from wholesale to retail, but also to manage the ownership costs so it became easier for our clients to move in and out of the cars that they loved. And so rather than owning one or two cars in 2 or 3 years, they might own 5 or 6 and try a few different configurations and trims and things like that for less total cost than it would have been if they just went out and bought their car and maybe just took it to Cars and Coffee or things like that. Now, at the time, Cars and Coffee was a fairly unheard of idea. This would have been starting in 2010, 11. And at that point, even the Atlanta Caffeine and Octane was very small, not that many cars going, certainly not that many exotics. It was your older muscle car guys that actually wanted to drink coffee and just stand around in a circle looking at each other's cars. And that was a great thing. But when you'd pull up in a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or, eventually even a McLaren, that was a very, very different complexion. complexion to what Caffeine and Octane or Cars and Coffee was. And so we had a lot of fun going to those events. We had a lot more fun going out on these drives. And in these roads, you'd find some nice technical bits, you'd find some wide open sweeping turns, and just some real great chances to experience what the car was capable of. And of course, you try to plan a route that's got places to regroup, good places to pull off and take some great pictures of your cars. And all these mementos just kind of serve to enrich what ownership was. And it was a great invitation to kind of aspiring owners or new exotic car owners that came to the community to say, this is a great way to get plugged into the local community or group of enthusiasts and join that. Make these cars a vessel for social exploration. Get to meet new friends, make new friends, find business partners or people to talk to about all your different ideas and not just the car things, because it's easy to find people who have the same cars and might want to go to the same restaurants or things like that, but really finding like-minded people that want to go out and push their cars pretty hard through some awesome turns on some awesome roads is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. And I actually consulted with a few friends that were much more familiar with the roads up there to kind of come up with this perfect loop that would be the right distance, take the right amount of time, find the right roads, and then get us back. And we used it over and over and over again. And essentially we just went up 400 towards Dahlonega and then went out 19 and then did a loop around 180, 348, which is the Richard B. Russell Scenic Highway, and then down alternate 75, back to 180, and then back through Dahlonega and south to Atlanta. And it just became the perfect place to drive. And we all got pretty familiar with the roads so that we would, have a more fun each time as we got more comfortable with all the turns and the way it was all constructed. Now, you're not going to memorize it like 100 laps into the Nürburgring, but it became a place that we were all very, very comfortable. Of course, things happen. There's debris on the roads or animals crossing or other, motorists and things like that. In fact, one time, I had just gotten my first LP640, the orange '08 Roadster, and I was leading our pack, and it was a pretty dry day. It had rained a little bit on us earlier than that, but there was no real issue with the roads. But I went around a bend, and immediately the car spun. And there was a guy behind us that had a GoPro, and you can see there was no smoke until I got about 90 degrees. So whatever I'd lost traction on, we think it was diesel fuel that had been spilled, just immediately spun the car. Now, fortunately, the guy behind me in a Gallardo Spider had some good ceramic brakes, and so he got stopped. But my wife Megan was with me at that time, and she is screaming hysterically that we're about to go off this mountain. Of course, it was not that hairy, but fortunately got it corrected and just rolled backwards down the hill just a little bit. But it was a scary time in my first and massively leveraged through financing exotic car. So fortunately that didn't end too badly. The only accident we ever had was a guy in a Ferrari 550 Maranello that felt like he knew the roads better than we did and decided to go out and push it, and he got in front of me by 2 turns, and on the third he went right off and spun it around and was pointing in the air in a ditch. But we got him towed out, and it wasn't too worse for wear. But we had a lot of great times, no real issues with cops. They kind of understand that that's what we go up and use these roads for, and as long as we're not passing people on double yellow lines or going too crazy, they all were pretty indulgent of it. So sometimes we all get pulled over together and get a lecture, but I don't think anybody in the group ever really got a ticket up there. And one of our frequent guests on these drives was actually Doug DeMuro at the time that he had his exotic car spotting site and was doing some early writing for Jalopnik. And he would come along, he brought his E63 wagon, the first one, and a CTS V wagon at some point, and a Ferrari 360 that he owned, and just had a lot of fun. It was just always a fun time of getting together with people that really got cars the way we wanted to get cars. And it worked magically well. I mean, everyone who came on these drives bought so many more cars from me than my normal clients that just would take them home, park them in their garage, and not necessarily be able to look back at the cars they'd owned and said, well, it was worth it because I got to use it for all these awesome things. And so as you're trying to find the place you want to live, be sensitive to the fact that we've got these cars, we want to go out and drive them, and all of this allows for a paradigm shift around the normal ownership patterns in exotic cars, where you're trying to keep the miles down and avoid all rock chips and not spend money adding things like clear bras and stuff like that to kind of manage the whole thing. If what you're really trying to do is get the most enjoyment out of the car, then you shift towards, all right, I want to protect it, but I don't really care if it's got some miles when I buy one or when I trade it in. Like, this is all about me finding the best ways to enjoy the ownership process. When a lot of people ask me about my advice on how to sell cars, it really is to be a facilitator of the hobby, not just a transactional relationship. You want to be a resource, not just for knowledge about the product, but of how to use it. And this was a huge part of how we did that. So I'll actually post a link in the description below to the route that we use, and you're welcome to go out and experiment and enjoy some of our favorite roads in North Georgia. I'd ask that you be reasonable and not too reckless so that we'll all be welcomed back, because keeping this thing, this idea, this way of enjoying our cars, and for some people, the way to sell more in the future is really to make sure that it's all done in a sustainable way. So it's the right cars on the right day, on the right roads, driven the right way. So have fun, be safe, and always find ways to enjoy the best roads around wherever you live.
Are you looking to buy your dream car? Premier Financial Services offers the flexibility of financing with the tax benefits of leasing. The PFS Simple Lease offers quick approvals and easy termination when you are ready for the next car. Visit our website and follow us for more.